Welcomed, traveler, to this corner of forgotten lore, where the past whispers its secrets only to those who have the time and inclination to listen. Today, we stroll through the bustling marketplaces of ancient Rome, but not as an emperor or senator. We feel the weight of a denarius in our pocket, knowing it could buy a loaf of bread or perhaps a gladiator's freedom. The specter of war looms large, and you might be called upon to don the armor of a Roman soldier. No, you won't be joining Caesar in the Senate or picking up a paintbrush to immortalize your name. You are, as the poet Catullus once bitterly complained, a pawn in the game of politics, subject to the whims of men whose names are carved in stone while yours is all but forgotten. You'll tell stories of home, of loved ones, and of the glories of Rome, keeping alive the memories that sustain you through the hardships of your lot. The weight of each blow you'll strike resonates with the echoes of 1,000 previous warriors. Their strength, your story, is one of quiet courage, of resilience in the face of adversity, and of the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of shared hardship, and determination flowing through you as you become a living embodiment of Rome's martial spirit. The echoes of your footsteps resonate with the ghosts of legions past, and the quiet strength you possess is the legacy of the Roman soldier. The world may be vast and unforgiving, but within the bounds of your duty, you find purpose, camaraderie, and the quiet pride that comes from knowing you are part of something greater than yourself. We taste the sweetness of grapes or figs, each bite a luxury in a world where most meals are bland and monotonous, and we hear the lilting notes of a prostitute singing by the roadside, her voice echoing the joys and sorrows of countless travelers who've passed that way before us. But beware, traveler, for this world is not all sunshine and roses. Yet even in this life, there is beauty to be found. The glint of sunlight on polished armor, the camaraderie of shared hardship, but the hopes and fears of a world that is slowly being consumed by the relentless march of progress. ULLC, the changing seasons mirrored in the shifting sands, and the subtle variations in the faces of the men around you. The young recruits full of bravado and the grizzled veterans with their eyes turned inward, each face a map of battles fought and survived, and the quiet dignity of the soldier standing watch, a silent sentinel in the face of whatever the night may bring. Your story isn't about riches or fame. It's about resilience, about endurance, about the quiet courage of those who stand, not for personal glory, but because duty calls. You'll walk the long, dusty roads with the Legion, carrying not just your equipment, and when the night is cold and the campfire offers little comfort, you'll huddle close to the men who've become your family, bound by the shared experience of life on the edge of the known world. Your weapons are more than just tools of war. They are extensions of your will, forged in the fires of necessity and tempered by the sweat and blood of countless campaigns. You are a Roman soldier, not a pawn in the game of emperors and senators, but a force unto yourself, a living testament to the indomitable spirit of Rome. So take heart, soldier, for, in this world of shadows and steel, your story matters. Picture this. You're awake before the sun has crested over the hills, your bones aching from the previous day's march, the cold ground stiff beneath your back. There's no pillow, no blanket, just a thin wool cloak and the hard earth. Breakfast is something you eat by yourself. Perhaps it's stale bread, maybe some olives if you're feeling lucky. No porter to help you, no mule to carry your burdens. This isn't a joke. It was your responsibility. It was your burden. That's why they called them Marius mules. Not because they were slow or stubborn like real mules, but because of their sheer weight. Then the horn sounds, the dreaded tubatotti, meaning time to rise. Each step you take is a reminder of the burden you now carry, both literally with the packs on your back. Their movements are so precise that your own hesitation stands out like a sore thumb. Discipline, the cornerstone of Roman military might, is something you have yet to master. The concept of unwavering obedience to orders, of sacrificing individual comfort for the good of the whole, is something you struggle to grasp, and figuratively, as a testament to the challenges that lay ahead. You maneuver in near-perfect formation, your spears and shields gleaming in the sun, a moment of hesitation that breaks the rhythm of the drill. You'd find yourself constantly parched, your throat dry and scratchy, yet the supply is limited and its source often questionable. You're surrounded by men who seem unfazed by the heat, their bodies honed to withstand such conditions, but you feel yourself wilting under the relentless sun. The Roman legion is a crucible of endurance, and the next phase of your initiation awaits. The weight of your armor, once a symbol of your dedication, now feels like a leaden shroud, each piece pressing down on you with renewed intensity. The relentless sun beats down, leaving you parched and desperate for shade. You squint, shielding your eyes against the glare. The midday heat shimmers on the horizon, blurring the distinction between the sky and the arid landscape below. Flogging, the most immediate and brutal, a reminder of the physical toll of disobedience. The weight of the sword is not merely physical, but psychological, demanding focus and control. For the warmth of a hearth fire, all of which are replaced here by the chill embrace of the night and the hollow echo of lonely drills. Under the watchful eyes of your fellow soldiers, you'll navigate the intricacies of combat, learning that true mastery of the gladius comes not from brute force, but from an understanding of its nuances. Your body, a tapestry of fatigue and minor injuries, bears silent testimony to the day's trials. Blisters on your feet, aches in your muscles, and a dull throbbing that reminds you of the flogging received earlier. These are not mere physical sensations, but badges of honor worn by every Roman soldier. You learn to pitch tents with military precision, to repair damaged equipment with practiced hands. Each task is a lesson in resourcefulness and teamwork. You pull your cloak tighter around you, seeking solace in its threadbare warmth. The night sounds weave a haunting melody, carrying with them tales of hardship, courage, and camaraderie. You understand now that the life of a Roman soldier is not for the faint of heart. It demands a strength of character, a resilience of body, and a steadfastness of spirit that you may not possess. If you found yourself lagging behind, don't fret. You're not alone. Many have attempted this journey, but few truly understand its rigors until they experience it firsthand. In this crucible of discipline, your actions will speak volumes about your character and commitment. The hours pass slowly, each minute stretching into an eternity. Sleep, elusive and shallow, offers little respite from the weariness that permeates your being. You grapple with the realization that you wouldn't last a day in the Roman legion. Reduced rations, a subtle but effective form of punishment that tests your resolve and endurance. Restless dreams of home and hearth are punctuated by the murmur of camp noises. The vast expanse of the night sky, studded with indifferent stars, offers little comfort. The soft tread of patrolling sentries, the low murmur of conversations, and the occasional bark of a dog, all weaving together a lullaby of the battlefield. Sentry duty, the lonely vigil at the edge of the encampment, where silence is broken only by the whisper of the wind and the rustle of leaves. The quiet hours of the night bring a clarity that is both sobering and introspective. You realize that the path of the Roman soldier is a difficult one, paved with hardship, discipline, and sacrifice. It's a test of alertness and solitude. Questions swirl in your mind. Doubts creep in. Was this journey of military exploration a folly? Can you truly endure the hardships of the Roman legion? Or the dreaded third option, a silent rebuff that cuts you off from your comrades, forcing you to complete your drills alone, a test of mental fortitude and isolation. The short sword feels surprisingly heavy in your hand, its balance and weight a challenge to master. As you lunge forward, attempting to replicate the elegant thrusts and parries you've observed, you realize the depth of skill required to truly wield this weapon of war. The consequences are swift and severe. The senior centurion steps forward, his face a mask of authority and disappointment. The late afternoon brings a brief respite from the harshest of the sun's rays, but it's a deceptive lull before the evening heat descends. His voice, when he speaks, is the embodiment of military precision and power. Each step you take is measured, each movement in unison with those around you. The air is thick with the scent of sweat, leather, and discipline. If you were a soldier in the Roman legion, this would be your daily reality. But let's be honest, you wouldn't last a day in such a disciplined, relentless environment. Let's dive into why. Your pag weighs nearly 45 kilograms, almost double your body weight. It contains your armor, tools, cooking supplies, and precious ration. As you struggle to haul your load onto your shoulders, you can feel the weight settling heavily onto your frame. The sting of hunger is a constant companion. Rations consist of hardtack biscuits, salted pork, and sour wine, barely enough to stave off the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. Each bite you take is a reminder of the meager sustenance you must rely on. He speaks of unwavering discipline and the heavy price of mistakes. Beside you, seasoned veterans stride purposefully, their steps echoing the cadence of countless marches past. Their faces, weathered and stoic, reveal tales of campaigns endured and battles fought. Their armor, polished and well-maintained, gleams in the sunlight, a testament to their pride and the value placed on their equipment. They are a picture of military precision and resilience, moving as one, their red cloaks billowing behind them, creating a sea of scarlet against the backdrop of blue sky and green landscape. Every soldier in the cohort seems to stiffen in response, except you. Your movements are hesitant, unsure, betraying the turmoil within. Can you keep up? Will you falter? Only time will tell. The commander bellows orders, cutting through the morning haze, emphasizing the importance of being prepared. The long hours of a Roman soldier's day begin. You march under the unforgiving gaze of the Mediterranean sun. In this moment, you're acutely aware of how out of place you are. Hours stretch into a seemingly endless drill field, and then it happens. That dreaded stumble, a misstep that throws off your entire formation. There are 3 punishments at his command, each designed to reinforce the value of obedience and preparedness. Centurion's eyes bore into you, assessing your reaction, gauging your resolve. What will your response be? How will you recover from your mistake? But even if you manage to avoid these punishments, can you endure the countless other challenges that test your limits? Water, often brackish and warm from the sun, is another precious commodity. The concept of rest seems like a distant memory, a luxury reserved for more fortunate souls. You long for a respite, for the comfort of shade, for the soothing touch of water on your skin. But such indulgences are not afforded to you. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the camp, a new set of duties arises. Then there's camp construction and maintenance, ensuring the safety and organization of the legion's temporary home. It's a testament to Roman efficiency and logistics. All the while, the specter of hunger and thirst lingers, a constant reminder of the need for vigilance and restraint. Now, armed with the knowledge of Roman tactics, you attempt to wield your each swing, each block, is a lesson in timing, strength, and strategy. Yet despite your growing proficiency with arms, you still find yourself yearning for the comforts of home. For a simple meal shared with loved ones, the day draws to a close. The sky a canvas of fading light and distant stars. Sleep, when it comes, is a fitful affair. As the night deepens, the temperature drops, offering a brief reprieve from the daytime heat. Yet this coolness does little to soothe your weariness. You lie there, staring at the darkness, grappling with thoughts of home, of family, of the life you once knew. You wonder if you were cut out for this life of constant struggle and sacrifice. The nocturnal chill seeps into your bones, a stark contrast to the daytime heat. Each rustle of leaves, each distant shout, tells a story of life on the edge, a reminder of the ever-present dangers that come with this way of life. And as the first faint hints of dawn begin to paint the eastern sky, you're left with a profound sense of the challenges that lie ahead. The thought of enduring another day of relentless drills, of hunger and thirst, of loneliness and risk, fills you with a sense of dread. So now, dear viewer, you have walked a day in the life of a Roman soldier. Did you make it through? If the eagle has fallen, the army is broken. In the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire stood resplendent from the North Sea to the south, a vast realm secured by legions of hardened veterans. But within this well-oiled machine of conquest and control, there existed a glaring hole, a naked vulnerability that threatened to undo all of Rome's territorial gains. Victories under their eagles were legion, but it was here in Britannia, where the 9th would make their name, fighting for a decade to subdue these unruly barbarians, their valor even winning them a special commendation from the Emperor Trajan. who had personally campaigned here, awarding them a golden trophy and a place in Rome's most elite military order. For along the fringe of the empire in Britannia, one legion went missing, and with it Rome's grip on their most unruly province began to fray. This is the story of the lost eagle of the 9th Legion, and this is Rome. Another inscription mentioning a centurion of the 9th was found carved into stone in the far from Britannia, and over 1,000 miles from York. These scraps of evidence are tantalizing, sure, but they don't give us much. They hint at the presence of the 9th, but they tell us nothing of their disappearance. Some say they perished on an ill-fated northern expedition beyond Hadrian's Wall, where the legion met its doom among Caledonian tribes. For instance, near the village of Magna, a series of trenches were dug across a shallow gully. He was also notoriously frugal with the imperial purse strings, and his penny-pinching ways soon made an enemy in the provincial governor, Quintus Petulus Sahu, who also, by pure coincidence, commanded the 9th Legion. You see, by the 3rd century, Rome's grip on Britannia was tenuous at best. The northern tribes were restless, and large parts of the province refused to accept Roman rule. Add to that a succession crisis, civil wars and incursions from across the empire. Did their standards really glisten on the peaks of Snowdonia? Forever out of reach, forever out of sight. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, if you want to know more about the ancient world, follow for more content. Did they really vanish without a trace? Swallowed by the fog and heather of Caledonia? Who knows? All we know for certain is that somewhere beneath these stones lies the truth of the lost legion. But until we find it, fact will fade into legend and the eagle will never fly again. And it's easy to understand why Hadrian wanted to avoid news of yet another crisis in Britain, especially news of a 5th column lurking within his own legions. In 108 AD, he openly defied Hadrian, leading a revolt against the emperor that nearly succeeded. Perhaps the 9th were indeed involved in the revolt, and Hadrian quietly purged their ranks. One eagle was recovered from a temple at Corduba, another from the fortress of Luca. 4 centuries later, the Emperor Honorius even commanded that a lost eagle be returned from Dacia. The longer Rome tried to pretend the 9th didn't exist, the more legends grew in their place. Or maybe they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught up in the crush of a failed rebellion. Whatever the truth, word of a Prologio conspiracy reached Rome. Hadrian ordered an investigation, and whoever was responsible was silenced, only ending when he was assassinated by his own bodyguard. Whether the 9th played any role in this rebellion is unknown, but it seems likely that they remained loyal to their absent commander. But by the time the Antonine Wall was constructed in the 140s, the 9th was gone, and Saguntium with it, reduced to a cattle shed. But if their fate was written in blood, why is there no blood? Where are the bodies? Well, perhaps we find the answer not in Britannia, but in Rome. Why did Rome abandon such a critical outpost? And what happened to the men stationed there? At first glance, the lines appeared to be modern, the work of some World War II tank training. But closer inspection revealed the truth. These were Roman, dating to between 78 and 108 AD. Yet no other traces of occupation were found nearby. No barracks, no latrines, just the trenches. Why were they built? Were they defensive works designed to hold off a northern attack? Or were they part of an even larger plan? A planned city whose construction was never finished? A disaster so catastrophic it forced Augustus to abandon his plans for German conquest, and turn instead to consolidating Roman control over their existing provinces. In Britannia too, we might expect the bones of the 9th to have been found in some mass grave. Some great pile of skulls and broken armor like the Rome on a British Caratacus found defeated and cast into a dungeon by the victorious Romans, only to die by his own hand before he could be paraded in Rome as a trophy. These dispossessed warriors often found themselves pressed into service by the highest bidder, mercenaries in an empire that had been built by legions. And nowhere was this phenomenon more pronounced than in Britain. Here, the slave labor of the native Britons kept the province running, while Rome imported hardened veterans to keep the peace. The pay may not have been good, but these men had little choice. But no such mass grave exists for the 9th. No bones, no barracks, no sign at all that a legion ever died here. Others say they were victims of political disgrace, quietly dissolved to protect imperial embarrassment. But what evidence do these theories have to stand on? And what can archaeology teach us about the fate of the Lost Legion? The Ninth Legion was Rome's hammer in Hispania, its shield in Gaul, its vanguard in the rugged wilds of Britannia. And then, silence. 9 years later, in 108 AD, the historian Cassius Dio noted that the Ninth was stationed in but after that, any trace of them vanishes, their name expunged from history, or so it seems. Now, this disappearance is one of the biggest mysteries in the ancient world. So many questions, so few answers. What happened to them? Did they die out, slowly fading into local folklore, or something more sinister? Was their fate deliberately covered up? There are a lot of theories about what happened to the Lost Legion. Now, when we think of lost legions, images of mass graves and battlefields spring to mind. Places like the Teutoburg Forest, where in 3 Roman legions were utterly destroyed by a coalition of Germanic tribes. What archaeologists have found, though, are fragments. A single stamped tile bearing the stamp of the Ninth Legion was discovered in York, the legion's former base camp. As archaeologists delved deeper into the soil, searching for answers, the only thing they turned up was more questions. A similar mystery surrounds the ruins of a former Roman fort that once housed a legion, including the Ninth. All of this speculation is bound together by the single thread of the Ninth's disappearance, the belief that somewhere in this landscape lie the bones of 5,000 Roman soldiers, murdered, vanished, or lost forever. After the demise of the Western Empire, its dispossessed soldiers became a common sight across the Mediterranean, men without a state, out of place, and out of uniform. In 106 AD, shortly before the Ninth disappeared, a new emperor took power, Hadrian, a man with no experience of war. And what happened next is anyone's guess, except that the emperor probably didn't want the whole story to get out. But cover up or not, rumors spread. How much truth lay behind those rumors is unknown. Evidence of the Ninth's existence was removed from public buildings. Statues were torn down. Records were rewritten. Even their insignia were called back from the field. Did the Ninth Legion really march across the northern moors, their ghostly ranks forever lost to the mists of time? So what do you think happened to the Ninth Legion? Let me know your thoughts below. How do you lose 3 legions? It sounds like an unanswerable question, especially if those legions are Roman. If there's one thing we know about Rome, it's that they didn't lose very often. Today, we begin our series with a study in failure and the story of the man who lost 3 legions, Publius Quinctius Verus. However, we all know that under Augustus's rule, Rome suffered its greatest defeat ever, in the loss of 3 entire legions. So how did it happen? How were these legions wiped off the face of the earth? What went wrong? Well, today let's find out how Verus lost 3 legions. They were hardy, fierce warriors who had tasted freedom and were unwilling to give it up. They had lived for generations without Roman interference, and they weren't about to bend the knee now. They resented outsiders and viewed the Romans with suspicion and disdain. And among them was a man named He saw the Germans as a means to greatness, a stepping stone to the consulship, and then the throne, and he believed that he could use them to get there. Verus then rode out of the camp to meet the warriors who had come to fight alongside him, confident that his trap had worked. You may have heard this story before, perhaps in a Hollywood film, but what we can say is that Verus marched his legions deep into the Teutoburg Forest to quell the rebellion, an act that proved to be his undoing. And if you have, then you're probably aware that what I've just told you isn't exactly accurate. It was the worst time of the year to be traveling, wet and muddy. The men grew weaker and more desperate by the hour, and as their situation grew more dire, so did their action. Food became scarce, and the men began to fight over scraps. Some deserted their posts, others looted supply wagons. Still, others murdered their officers. But as he spoke, a band of Germanic warriors burst into the tent and attacked. The officers were taken by surprise, but they fought back bravely. Verus, too, drew his sword and joined the fray, but it was in vain. People stood around the forum in stunned silence as they listened to the news being announced by the tribunes. Augustus was devastated. He had trusted Verus, with his most prized possession, and he had failed. The army that had once been the pride of Rome was now tearing itself apart. If you liked it, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more historical tales. Some say that he was killed in the battle, but that's unlikely. Varus was a man who wanted to be great, who wanted to carve his name in stone. But he bit off more than he could chew. He underestimated his enemies and overestimated his abilities. And in the end, he paid the ultimate price. 3 legions were lost in the Teutoburg forest. The 17th, 18th, and 19th were wiped off the face of the earth. That much is certain. Others claimed that he took his own life rather than face capture, humiliation, or a fate at the enemy's hands. Discipline crumbled. The proud Roman formations faltered and panicked. Soldiers fought against each other, and he knew that he would never forgive himself. It was the worst nightmare of every general, a complete breakdown of order and control, and Varus found himself unable to stop it. His authority had broken down, and his men were beyond saving. They were exhausted, hungry, and afraid. On the 3rd day, as the sky opened up and poured down a torrent of rain, Varus realized that there was no hope of escape. The forest was a trap, and his legions were its prisoners. Winter had just ended, and rain had soaked the ground, turning it into a thick, sucking mud that slowed the legion's progress. Thick woods constricted their movements, and Germanic warriors struck with brutal efficiency. For 3 days, chaos reigned. We don't know the real reason why Varus betrayed the Germans, nor do we know the exact details of the events that transpired. All we have to go on is the writings of a few Roman historians, men who wrote centuries after the event in question, and who had their own biases and agendas. He was playing the long game, biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when he felt he had it, he moved against the Germans. This is the first episode of our new series, The Commanders, where we'll be looking at some of the most famous generals of history and telling the stories of how they won and lost wars. Arminius agreed, seeing it as a chance to prove himself to his adopted country. He invited his fellow chieftains to meet with Varus and discuss strategy, and when they arrived, he informed them that Varus wished to speak with them. He had spent much of his youth in Rome and was educated in Roman culture. He spoke Latin like a Roman and understood their customs and laws, and yet he was fiercely loyal to his homeland and its people. You could call him the German Hannibal. Ambition is what makes us human. It's that burning desire to acquire more that drives us forward, that compels us to excel, to achieve, to dominate. He knew them well enough to understand what they desired, autonomy and respect, and he promised both. He left them alone to govern themselves in their territories, interfering only when absolutely necessary. He showed them that he wasn't like other Romans, and for a while, it seemed to work. The Germans respected him and accepted him, but it was all an act, and there was perhaps no Roman who embodied this more than Publius Quinctilius Varus. Now, don't get me wrong, Germania had been a client kingdom of Rome for quite some time now, but after a decade of failed campaigns by several Roman generals, the tribes of Germania remained It was Rome's thorn in the side, a constant irritation that needed to be dealt with once and for all. And so when Augustus appointed Varus to the position, it was clear what he wanted from his most prized pupil: total domination. He was born into the elite, educated in the finest schools, connected to the influential, a man who had everything a Roman could want and more. As a young man, he caught the eye of Augustus himself, and rose quickly through the ranks of Roman governors, until he was appointed the governorship of the unruly province of Germania. So Varus, true to his ambitious nature, set about crushing the natives not just militarily, but culturally as well. He wanted them not just to submit to Roman rule, but to become Romanized themselves, to accept Roman law and customs and taxes, to forget their old ways. In short, he wanted them to become like him, perfect, civilized Romans. But Germania was no normal province. These people weren't normal subjects. Now, Arminius was no ordinary German. He was a chieftain, yes, but also a Roman citizen. When Varus arrived, he made sure to win the Germans' support. You see, Varus, too, was ambitious. He convinced the tribal leaders including Arminius, that there was a rebellion brewing in another part of the province, and invited them to put it down together. And so the unsuspecting chieftains rode into the center of the camp, where they were met, not by Varus, but by armed soldiers who promptly arrested them. Now, you may be thinking that this is all very familiar. We can't know for certain what happened in that fateful meeting, whether the Germans were tricked or simply misunderstood. It was 09 CE, and the three legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, were marching through the thick woods. Supply lines were shattered. His legions were trapped in the forest, surrounded by enemies and cut off from their supplies. Varus tried to restore order, but it was hopeless. He called a meeting of his officers and told them that they had only one option. The tent was soon a scene of carnage, and when the fighting died down, Varus was nowhere to be seen. The truth is, we don't know what happened to Varus, but we do know the outcome. News of the disaster reached Rome and shook the city to its foundation. The loss of three legions was a scar on Rome's psyche, a reminder that even Rome's might had its limits. So there we have it. The story of how Varus lost three legions. A story of ambition, betrayal, and hubris. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching. Victory on the battlefield began with spades, chisels, and quiet ingenuity. Rome's engineers literally paved the empire. Over 400,000 kilometers of roads stretched across the provinces, linking armies, merchants, and messages. At Actium, at Caransabi's, on the banks of the Tiber, Caesar's eagle soared, conquering lands and peoples. But these triumphs were only possible thanks to an army within the army. The men who forged the tools of war and built the infrastructure of empire. The Roman military engineer. In this episode, we explore how Roman military engineers built the backbone of one of history's most successful empires. The victories of Rome's legions are legendary. Bridges spanned treacherous rivers. Forts sprang up along the frontiers, their layouts precise, their walls formidable. Aqueducts carried fresh water to cities bustling with life. And when the legions went to war, siege engines, ballistic catapults, and battering rams broke through the defenses of besieged towns. When Augustus came to power in 27 BC, Rome controlled most of the Mediterranean. But as emperors came and went, ambitious generals pushed further afield. Roads were rough, accommodations scarce, and bandits and wild animals were everywhere. Even the emperor's couriers, traveling by horseback, had to complete many legs of their journey on foot. To address this, the Romans created a system of military roads, which eventually covered over 400,000 kilometers, enough to circle the earth nearly 13 times. By the end of the 1st century AD, Roman legions were stationed as far away as Britain and Mesopotamia. Siegecraft was one of the most exciting parts of being a Roman military engineer. In fact, some historians believe that the use of siege engines in battle may have helped the Romans to defeat their enemies as effectively as their legions did. He and his men worked long hours in dangerous conditions. They were often away from home for months or even years at a time. But despite the difficulties, they knew that their work was essential to the success of the Roman army. Some of these bridges were simple affairs made of wood or stone. Others were more elaborate, such as the bridge built by Nero's successor, Vespasian. This aqueduct was over 19 kilometers long, and it brought water from the way to the city of Rome. Another famous aqueduct was the Aqua Virgo, built by the Emperor Nerva in 97 AD. This aqueduct was over 24 kilometers long, and it brought water from the mountains of the Sabine region to the city of Rome. This bridge was over 400 meters long and 6 meters wide, and it was decorated with statues and fountains. It was considered one of the marvels of the ancient world. They were decorated with statues and fountains, and they were designed to blend in with the landscape. Today, the city's water supply comes from a variety of sources, including the river Tiber, the river Aniene, and underground aquifers. But the aqueducts still stand as a reminder of Rome's engineering genius. In fact, aqueducts were considered to be one of the most prestigious projects that a Roman emperor could undertake. Building aqueducts was expensive and difficult, but it was also very rewarding. They were the ones who kept the legions supplied, fed, and fighting. But even these simple aqueducts were feats of engineering, requiring the Romans to dig through hills and mountains to reach the sources of water. They were the ones who helped Rome to conquer and hold on to its vast empire. They were also used to water the emperor's gardens and parks. They were also used to fill the public baths and fountains. In fact, much of the water that flowed through Rome's aqueducts was used for public purposes. Only a small amount was used for drinking and sanitation. Building these engines was a highly skilled job that required a lot of precision and care. If a catapult, for example, was not built correctly, it could collapse and kill the soldiers who were trying to use it. Rome's 7 hills were famously defensible, but its supply of water was not, and as the population grew, so did the need for aqua. That is why the Roman military engineers had to be some of the most skilled craftsmen in the empire. There were many different types of siege engines, each with its own purpose. Catapults, for example, were used to hurl stones and other objects over the walls of a city. They may not have been as glamorous as the generals or as famous as the emperor, but without them, Rome would not have been able to conquer and rule the known world. Ballistae were large crossbows that could shoot arrows and javelins. Battering rams were used to break down doors and battering rams. For every mile a Roman legion advanced into enemy territory, 2 others had to be marched and camps had to be erected nightly, roads repaired, defenses maintained. They used a variety of tools, including picks, shovels, rakes, and wheelbarrows, to cut down trees, move earth and rock, repair bridges, and lay the stones that formed the famous Via Appia. They knew that the roads they were building were essential to the success of the Roman military machine. Without good roads, the legions could not move quickly enough to defeat their enemies. Without good roads, merchants could not transport goods to the cities. Without good roads, messengers could not deliver important messages in time. Much of this work was backbreaking and dangerous, and the engineers had to be strong and resourceful to complete their assignments on time. But their work was rarely celebrated. They were not the ones leading armies into battle or signing treaties with kings. They were the quiet architects of conquest, working behind the scenes to make Rome's victories possible, and siege engines to batter down the walls of enemy towns. They were also responsible for designing and building the camps that the legions lived in while they were on campaign. These camps were more than just places to sleep. They were also home to workshops, kitchens, latrines, even hospitals. If the army was to stay in the field for months or years at a time, it required an almost invisible army of specialists to keep the legions supplied, fed and fighting. But engineering triumphs were just one part of their labors. First, they joined the ranks of the auxiliary troops, learning the skills of camp construction, road maintenance, and siege. After 5 years, the best of these recruits were selected for officer training, where they learned the intricacies of military engineering. Upon graduation, they were assigned to an engineering cohort, where they would spend the rest of their careers building and maintaining the empire's vast network of infrastructure. To become a military engineer, a Roman citizen had to undergo rigorous training. They were the backbone of the army, responsible for some of Rome's most impressive achievements. So who were these engineers? Where did they come from? And what did they actually do? Let's find out. Traveling that far, especially on foot, was no easy task. Military engineers were responsible for designing, planning, and building these roads, as well as maintaining them once they were completed. Despite the difficulties, the engineers took great pride in their work. When the legions went to war, the military engineers were there too, building bridges over rivers, forts along the frontier. Much of the work was done by hand, but the engineers also used sophisticated tools like the groma, a surveying tool used to lay out the camp, and the siege engine. These siege engines were not just used against cities, they were also used in battles against other armies. Life as a Roman military engineer was not easy. So next time you hear about the Roman legions, remember also the engineers. Augustus's successors, from Tiberius to Domitian, continued the tradition, overseeing the construction of aqueducts that brought fresh water to cities, public buildings, and private homes. Along the aqueducts, the engineers built bridges to carry the flow of water over valleys and rivers. But not all of Rome's aqueducts were so grand. Some were little more than ditches that carried water from one place to another. One of the most famous aqueducts was the Aqua Appia, built by the Emperor Nero in 62 AD. These aqueducts were not just used to bring water to the city. Aqueducts were not just functional, they were also works of art. It's hard to imagine modern-day Rome without its aqueducts. And if you want to learn more about ancient Rome, please don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was maintained with a shovel in each hand by a legionary like Lucius Cassius. Lucius would have had his fill of marching, drilling, building roads and fort, all for the glory of Rome, and the pay of a single loaf of bread a month, and a ton of stale salted pork to last the year. Not his real dinner, mind you, but the one he'll dream of, in his tent while eating his rations under escort of a loyal centurion. Publius has joined Cassius and the other 50 men of his cohort in their mess hall. He, too, will eat with them when not on campaign. But today is an important mission. Tonight, they dine with Emperor Hadrian himself. His gruel would be thick with grit and dust from the road, mixed with stale water from whatever stream they could find. On each end of the table, a bronze tripod holds aloft a massive flaming torch to ward off evil spirits. He's followed by his centurion, then the rest of his cohort, moving purposefully and silently, each man armed with a short sword beneath his robe. All eyes turn to the door, and the servants fall silent. And to show off the sparkling crystal glass filled with wine from Hispania, there are oysters, fresh shucked from the shells and served with vinegar and chopped mint, plump grapes still warm from the sun, slices of crisp bacon cooked with pepper and garlic, a frittata filled with cheese and chunks of roasted boar, and a dish of flamenco tongues, a delicacy reserved only for emperors and the most important nobles. Hadrian seems pleased with the meal, laughing easily and engaging in lively conversation. With a graceful sweep of his hand, he calls for silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, he begins to recite verses from Catullus, his voice ringing with power and emotion. But his eyes betray a certain weariness, and Cassius wonders if the burden of empire weighs heavily on his shoulders. Behind him come two women, both beautiful, but in very different ways. One is mature and graceful, Sabina, the emperor's wife. Her bearing is elegant and refined, her gaze sharp and intelligent. Cassius, however, can't help but feel a pang of longing for his own life. Or perhaps there's been a plot against the emperor. He beckons to two musicians, and together, they begin to sing a bawdy song about a soldier's life. Wine flows freely, and the guests become boisterous, sharing stories and jokes, their laughter echoing through the tranquil. But Cassius remains relatively quiet, content to observe the festivities and savor the fleeting moment of camaraderie. The lyrics are exaggerated and comical, poking fun at the trials and tribulations of military life. He apologizes for the interruption, explaining that there's been a disturbance outside the city, and he must attend to it immediately. Cassius can't help but laugh along with the others, finding amusement in the light-hearted jests. Sabina rises from her couch and announces that she, too, must leave. They share their impressions of the emperor, his wife and Antinous, as well as the sumptuous feast and the surprisingly good wine. She offers a polite smile to her guests, bidding them farewell. Cassius can tell that they're trying to hide their true feelings of awe and wonder. To have dined with emperors, even if it was just for a night, was an honor, a story that he'll likely tell for the rest of his life. How could such extravagance exist in a world where so many people, including those who fight to defend it, live in poverty? He wonders if he'll ever see Hadrian, Sabina, or Antinous again. And if he does, what will he say? How will he act? These thoughts race through his mind as he watches Hadrian leave with his escort. Yet he can't help but feel a part of that world now, if only in his memories. He thinks of the faces of his fellow soldiers, their expressions a mix of awe and envy. Then the reality of his situation returns in full force. He's not in the emperor's palace anymore. He remembers the weight of the emperor's gaze, the unspoken expectations resting upon him. He's in his barracks with his fellow soldiers, far from the opulence and intrigue of the night before. The clash between the squalor of his everyday life and the fleeting glimpse of luxury leaves him with a strange sense of emptiness. Most of all, he longs for the feeling of being seen, of being more than just a nameless soldier in the vast army of Rome. He can't help but dream of fig and wine, of flickering torches, and the sound of lyre music drifting through the night. He listens intently, trying to decipher the subtle meanings and hidden agendas being discussed. He knows that the fate of empires often hangs in the balance of such conversations. The smell of stale, sweat, and mildew replaces the lingering scent of figs and wine. The coarse fabric of his blanket feels rough against his skin. The memory of that night, with its blend of luxury and intrigue, its laughter and its secrets, will linger in his dreams. He dreams of a world where he could express himself so freely, where his voice could be heard beyond the battlefields. He remembers the battles he's fought in, the victories he's won, and the comrades he's lost. As Cassius steps out into the cool night air, he looks back at the triclinium, its grandeur both fascinating and intimidating. He realizes that the Pax Romana, the peace that allows for such feasts, is bought and paid for by soldiers like him. One by one, the guests depart, leaving Cassius and the other soldiers feeling somewhat awkward. Trailing behind him is Antinous, a young man barely out of boyhood, handsome and slender, dressed in white robes that accentuate his athletic form. The opulence, the extravagance, the sheer excess of it all had left him both awestruck and slightly uneasy. Musicians strum gentle melodies on their lyres, filling the room with enchanting music. He walks with confidence, aware of the attention he receives. Its aroma flows through the air, spiced with cinnamon and sweet herbs. Food is brought forward and placed on the table, and the servants retreat to the shadows. He approaches Hadrian with a solemn expression and whispers something in the emperor's ear. Hadrian's face darkens, and he excuses himself from the table. Each slave wears a mask over their face, carefully hiding their identity, so that their features cannot distract from the food. Today, we imagine this Roman soldier eating his breakfast right off of the battlefield, quickly and without ceremony. And yet, even he has a story worth telling. He tastes it slowly, nodding his head in approval. Next to him, Sabina eats with regal elegance, her movements fluid and controlled. She picks up a cup of wine and raises it in a toast to the emperor. Even a coarse soldier who sits on the ground, sweat stinging his eyes, still craves the warmth of good food. Now let's return to the 2nd century AD and join our friend Cassius at dinner. It's an honor to be invited to the emperor's table, but the reality is that those chosen are merely there to entertain him and ensure his safety. Still, the chance to dine on food fit for a god is enough to make any soldier hungry. Soon they arrive at the Palatine Hill, home to the emperor's palace. Soldiers move quickly up the marble stairs and enter the triclinium. A crystal chandelier hangs overhead, suspended from the ceiling by golden chains. It glitters brightly, reflecting in the polished marble floors where no shoe or sandal dares tread. Slaves have spread out couches covered in fine linen and piled them high with cushions. Above, the ceiling appears miles away, hidden by heavy curtains drawn across the room. A gasp escapes Cassius. He's never seen anything like it. All along the Via Sacra, slaves carry torches and oil lamps to light the way through the twisting streets. The walls are covered with frescoes painted in vivid colors on plaster, smoothed as fine as marble. Servants approach, carrying platters of food and baskets overflowing with grapes and figs. Flavio arrives first, wearing his finest uniform, complete with the silver clasp his mother gave him before he left for his campaign. Hadrian enters, leaning heavily on a golden cane. It's obvious he wants for his every need. The emperor takes his place at the center of the couches. Cassius watches in awe as the first course is presented, a mosaic of flavors and textures. Hadrian picks up a fork and spears a piece of tongue. As the feast continues, Cassius steals glances at the emperor, eager to catch his eye and perhaps earn a word of praise. Suddenly, a hush falls over the room and all eyes turn to Antinous. Cassius leans closer to Publius, his centurion, and whispers, "Did you know he was a poet?" Publius shakes his head, equally surprised. As Antinous finishes his recitation, applause erupts, and Hadrian beams with pride. The entertainment continues with dancers weaving gracefully between the couches, their movements fluid and mesmerizing. But Cassius's thoughts drift back to the frescoes on the walls, which depict scenes of war and conquest. As the evening progresses, the conversation turns to politics and gossip, and Cassius finds himself caught in a crossfire. Before long, A new arrival interrupts the discussion. It's Marcus, another centurion from Cassius's cohort. Cassius sees this exchange and wonders if there's trouble brewing. Is it another barbarian invasion? Has one of Hadrian's beloved villas been damaged? Meanwhile, Antinos turns to the group and announces that it's time for more entertainment. As the night wears on, the revelry reaches a fever pitch. Soon, though, the party comes to an abrupt end. Hadrian reappears, his expression grave. With the emperor gone, the mood shifts, and the energy Antinos lingers for a moment longer, exchanging pleasantries and accepting compliments before taking his leave. They rise from their couches, stiff from hours of reclining, and prepare to leave. He remembers the stories he'd heard about the emperor's lavish lifestyle, but nothing had prepared him for this. On the walk back to their barracks, Cassius and his cohort discuss the evening's events in hushed tones. There is a mix of admiration and envy in their voices, as they talk about the beautiful frescoes and the luxurious couches. He himself feels a strange mixture of emotions, excitement, yes, but also a sense of unease and still, he can't help but be grateful for the experience. As they approach their barracks, Cassius's thoughts drift back to the flickering torches and the lingering scent of wine and figs. He knows that his simple life as a soldier is worlds away from the intrigues and pleasures of the imperial court. As he settles into his bunk for the night, Cassius closes his eyes and tries to forget the taste of fig and wine. He remembers the weight of his own unease, the dissonance between the opulence around him and the squalor of their barracks. And as the sun rises, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Cassius wakes up with a start. For a moment, he hesitates, unsure if he's still in his dream. Hadrian's face, with its mixture of wariness and determination, flashes before Cassius's eyes. Cassius stretches out on his hard cot, the memories of the previous night still vivid in his mind. He misses the taste of the figs, the texture of the fine linen beneath him, and the murmur of voices engaged in lively conversation. As the day's work begins to take shape in the distance, Cassius knows that his life is here, not among the riches and the intrigues of the imperial court. Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can see it all from our camp in one. Colosseum, Trevi Fountain, Pantheon, Pizza. No matter how much history you know, there's always something new to discover in the Eternal City. Explore more about what life was like along the wall with this month's selection from the History Vault. At Empire's edge, Hadrian's Wall snaked across northern Britain. Stone fortresses. 2,000 years ago, it was a place of lonely duty and danger. But for the men who lived and died here, it was also home. And the constant feeling of being cut off from everything and everyone. For many of the men stationed along the wall, it was an isolated existence, a world away from the bustle of Rome. Most of the men along the wall were young recruits, barely teenagers, snatched from their families and thrust into military service. Others were convicts, serving out their sentences under the watchful eyes of their centurions. The soldiers left their posts and headed back to the safety of the fortress. The soldiers huddled in their barracks, trying to keep warm. The nights were long and cold. The wind howled outside the fortress, rattling the wooden shutters. Sometimes the men heard strange sounds in the night, the distant call of a bird, the rustling of leaves, or perhaps the whisper of spirits. The soldiers told stories of ghosts that haunted the wall, of omens and portents, of northern magic and wild men who lived in the shadows. They spoke of battles with giants and beasts, of warriors who could change shape at will, and of kings who ruled over the underworld. These tales were part of the folklore of the time, passed down 4 generations by storytellers and bards. They were a way of explaining the unknown, of giving shape to the darkness. For the soldiers, it was a way of coping with the loneliness, the isolation, and the fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows grew long and the temperature dropped. The soldiers rose, stiff and aching, and prepared for another day along the wall. But it was also a barrier between the living and the dead, a line between the known world and the unknown. Discover rare artifacts, personal stories, and stunning photography from the people who lived and died here. The wind whips across the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of heather and the sound of distant drums. A lone rider emerges from the mist, his face obscured by a hooded cloak. He carries a message from the emperor, an order that will change the course of history. This is the story of Boudica, warrior, queen of the Iceni tribe, and her rebellion against the Roman Empire. And along that line, in the shadow of the wall, stood the men who guarded Rome's northern frontier. Their shifts were long and dangerous, but they had each other. The men of the fortress were bound together by their shared experiences, the cold, the hunger, the boredom, the fear. They were also bound by their hope of a better future, a future that lay beyond the wall. The chill of the evening seeped into their bones. Inside the fortress, life was a little warmer, a little safer. The soldiers gathered around the fire, sharing stories and catching up on gossip. Some played games, others traded with the locals. What was traded? No one knows. But it's likely that everyday items such as food, clothing, and tools changed hands. Perhaps a leather tunic was given for a woolen cloak or a pot of honey. The soldiers may have bartered for rare local honey or traded silver for handmade jewelry. It was a chance for the soldiers to get something unique, something that reminded them of their time along the wall. Many had been promised land at the end of their service, a reward for their loyalty and sacrifice. All of them had one thing in common. They were far from home, but it was not without its rewards. Letters from home, when they arrived, carried whispers of distant Rome. They spoke of balmy evenings spent in taverns and brothels, of gladiators fighting to the death in the Colosseum, of senators plotting in the Forum. They described a world of marble and gold where the Tiber flowed and the emperor's image adorned every coin. The letters made the long, dark months pass a little quicker. They were read and reread until the paper was worn thin and the ink faded. Patrols along the wall could take them deep into enemy territory. In summer, the soft mud turned to sucking quagmire. In winter, it became a treacherous ice. Their job was to find the enemy, harass their supply lines, or simply gather intelligence. They might be gone for days or even weeks. Repairs and maintenance were constant. The stones of the wall were battered by wind and rain. The turrets and mile castles needed watching. So did the roads and bridges. If the wall was to stand for centuries, it needed care. Drills were frequent. Soldiers lined up, ready for action, learning to fight as a unit, honing their skills with sword and shield. When the enemy was spotted, word was sent back to the fort. Then the real work began. And everywhere, thick fog rolled in off the North Sea, bringing with it the smell of salt and the threat of attack. This is the story of those soldiers and the wall they called home. See inside a museum dedicated to the wall's only African soldier. The final stretch ran through what is now known as North, starting at the mouth of the River Tyne and ending at the Firth of Clyde. The wall followed the natural contours of the land, snaking between hills and valleys, but that made it hard to defend, especially in winter. Meet an author whose book inspired the TV series that brought Hadrian's Wall to life for millions. Uncover rare images taken by a pioneering photographer who risked his life to capture the wall as breathtaking landscapes. Plus, hear from historians who will reveal fascinating stories never before told, including the tale of a Roman fort, where the entire garrison was wiped out by a single tribe. All these stories and more are yours to discover with this month's selection from the History Vault. Hadrian's Wall stretched for 73 miles across northern Britain, but its construction took nearly 2 decades and was completed until AD 128. Soldiers stationed along the wall had to contend with bitter winds whipping across open moorland, endless gray skies that mirrored their moods. The nearest supplies were often days away, meaning that garrisons were self-sufficient, subsisting on rations and the produce of their own gardens. But most of the time the letters never came. On a typical day along the wall, patrols would head out into the mist. In the late afternoon, the bugle sounded for retreat. As darkness fell, the gate was locked and the drawbridge raised. Then, just before dawn, the bugle sounded again. Hadrian's Wall was meant to be a barrier between civilization and the wild. It was a statement of power, a symbol of Roman might. If you enjoyed this video, you can learn more about life along the wall with this month's selection from the History Vault. The amphitheater roared, sand stained red. But behind the spectacle was harsh reality. When we picture ancient Rome, images spring to mind. The Colosseum, chariots, Gladiators. We see brave warriors in combat, locked in deadly contests for our amusement. These men, these gladiators, are seen as larger-than-life heroes, invincible in battle, famous throughout the land. Oh no, a large number were slaves, prisoners, or condemned criminals. Oh, and one more thing. You're gonna need some wooden swords. Wooden swords. That's right. These aspiring warriors didn't start off with the real deal. No, sir. Their weapons of choice were sticks. Imagine getting a wound so bad it takes two people to carry you off the field, only to return to the barracks with a limp and a bandage made from old rags. That was their reality. For gladiators, an injury wasn't just a setback. It was a badge of honor, a mark of survival. The healers did their best, stitching wounds, setting bones, but the scars remained, both on the body and in the soul. Sometimes an injury was so bad that it ended a gladiator's career. But that wasn't necessarily a good thing, and that's exactly what happened. If a gladiator refused to fight, whether from fear or exhaustion, he might be left with no other choice but to face the lion. They fought back against their masters, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Rebellion was risky, dangerous, but for some, it was a necessary evil. They fought not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of their fellow gladiators. Being a gladiator was not just a profession, it was a life sentence. Behind the roar of the crowd, behind the clash of swords, were men with hopes, dreams, and fears. They were not just fighting machines, they were human beings. And their stories, though often forgotten, deserve to be remembered. But let's be real, most gladiators didn't rise up. Remember the gladiators, the true gladiators, the ones who fought not just for glory, but for survival. The ones whose stories are written in blood, sweat, and scars. They didn't challenge the system. They just endured. They took the punishment, the beatings, the loss of limbs, all for a chance at something better. A chance that was often denied to them. It was a brutal reality check. A reminder that in this game, there was no second place. Either you fought or you were food for the lions, with no skills to fall back on, and no freedom to look forward to. These men were trapped, sentenced to a life of hardship and struggle. At first, they sparred with wooden swords, learning the basic moves, blocking, thrusting. Well, the answer depended on whether you were the victor or the If you were victorious, congratulations, you survived another day. But don't pop the champagne just yet. Winning didn't mean freedom or riches. Sure, the crowd might cheer your name, but tomorrow they'll be cheering for someone else. The adulation was fleeting. The fame, a momentary flicker in the darkness. You might receive a prize, maybe a garland of flowers, or a simple scroll proclaiming your valor. But what good are flowers or scrolls when you're still trapped in the same life? But when the applause died down, the cheers turned to jeers. The crowd wanted blood, guts, and glory. You might be executed in the arena, stabbed or beaten to death, or perhaps you were thrown to the lions, a fate worse than death for some. Others were sold, traded like commodities, sent to different parts of the empire to fight another day under another master. No matter the outcome, the gladiator's life was marked by hardship, struggle, and often tragedy. Their stories were tales of courage, yes, but also of despair. Their victories, moments of brilliance in a sea of darkness. It happens, sure, but it's like winning the lottery. Very unlikely. Most gladiators toiled in obscurity, fighting for years, hoping for a kind emperor or an adoring crowd that might set them free. But for many, freedom was a distant dream, never to be realized. And if you didn't deliver, you weren't just booed, you were in danger. Imagine waking up before the sun, not in a cozy bed. Oh no, but in a crowded barracks with the smell of sweat and stale urine hanging heavy in the air. After a quick breakfast of bread and water, the gladiators headed to the training ground. There they sparred, they strategized, they honed their skills. The afternoon brought more training, more sweat, more injuries. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they returned to the barracks, not for a relaxing evening, but for more chores, more eating, and more sleeping. It was a cycle that repeated day in and day out. No time for leisure, no room for comfort. The fickle crowd could turn on you in the blink of an eye, demanding your head on a platter. One moment you're being celebrated, the next you're being cursed. It was a high-risk, high-reward game, and the rewards were often less than stellar. All the while, their bodies were bruised, their muscles aching. This was not your average fencing class. It was a crash course in combat. It was a do-or-die lesson. The difference between a well-placed thrust and a fatal one, that was the line they walked. Over and over, they drilled, they fell, they got back up. No fancy footwork, just raw grit and determination. Some were foreigners captured in wars. Others were debtors, hopelessly in debt, and unable to repay. Yes, we're talking about bread and water, maybe a little meat if they were lucky, but mostly it was bread and water. Picture this, a training session lasting from early morning till late afternoon, and all you've ever got to keep your energy up is a piece of bread and a jug of water. No wonder many gladiators supplemented their official rations with whatever they could get their hands on, even if it meant stealing. Hunger was a constant companion, a reminder that the fight for food was as real as the fight in the arena. They fought for every bite, every drop of sustenance. Still others were volunteers, men who had little to lose and everything to gain by stepping into the arena. You might think being a gladiator was a noble profession, but think again. It was more like a death sentence disguised as a fighting chance. But what if this picture is misleading? What if the truth about these great warriors is more grim than glory? Welcome to my channel, and today, let's find out what really happened to the gladiators after their fight. Now, first, let's talk about who these gladiators actually were, because here's a surprise for you. Most of them were not freeborn Romans. You want to be a gladiator? Well, here's your training. And let's not forget about the food. As they trained, these future gladiators subsisted on a diet that would make even the most hardened athlete balk. Medical care wasn't much better. Injuries were treated, yes, but not with the kind of care that would make you feel any better. Now, let's chat about fame. Being a gladiator wasn't like being a rock star, although the crowds did cheer their names. And then there's freedom. You might have heard tales of gladiators becoming libertadores, of emperors bestowing coveted freedom upon their favorites. Now, let's paint a picture of a typical day in the life of a gladiator. Being a gladiator was not just about fighting. It was about enduring. The rules of the game were simple. Fight or be thrown to the lions. Some gladiators, though, refused to be just pawns in the game. So what about after the fight? When the dust settled and the crowd dispersed? What then? If you lost, well, things were a bit more grim. Even the victors bore the weight of their survival. The scars, the injuries, the memories. So remember this, the next time you picture the Colosseum in all its glory. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time. While legions marched, the navy ruled the seas. Ships patrolled trade routes, ferried soldiers, and battled pirates. Storms battered their vessels. Days at sea blurred into a monotonous routine. Oh, how tedious life is for a Roman sailor. When we think of ancient Rome, images of gladiators, emperors, and the Colosseum spring to mind. But what about the vast Roman navy that patrolled the Mediterranean, ensuring the empire's prosperity? Imagine yourself as a sailor on a Roman merchant ship traversing the azure waters of the Mediterranean. The year is 80 AD, and you are part of a crew transporting vital cargo from Egypt. The Mediterranean, with its calm waters and numerous islands, may seem like the perfect getaway. But don't be fooled. This sea is a hotbed of activity with treacherous storms, hidden reefs, and beautiful but dangerous ports. When the storm finally subsides, you find that the ship has survived, but the ordeal has taken its toll on all of you. You step ashore in Alexandria, physically and emotionally drained after battling the elements. The Mediterranean, with its unpredictable nature, reminds all who sail it that even the mightiest of vessels can be humbled by its power. With his experience in handling weapons and fighting alongside his fellow sailors, he becomes an invaluable asset. Their camaraderie is forged in the face of danger, where the battling pirates are enduring the wrath of the Mediterranean. While the navy played a pivotal role in Rome's dominance, its operations remained largely shrouded in secrecy. Information about naval strategies, tactics, and even the existence of certain naval bases was closely guarded to prevent enemy nations from gaining valuable insights, and was crucial in making their ships more durable and resistant to the harsh marine environment. This formula was kept secret to prevent other nations from replicating it and improving their own ships. The Roman navy played a pivotal role in ensuring the flourishing of the Roman Empire, undertaking critical missions that were vital to Rome's prosperity and survival. These missions ranged from the protection of trade routes to the suppression of rebellions and the defense against foreign invaders. Whether it was reinforcing distant provinces or transporting soldiers on campaign, the navy's efficiency was crucial to Rome's military might. During times of civil unrest, the navy's warships would sail to troubled waters, projecting Roman power and restoring order. By maintaining a strong naval presence in strategic locations, the navy was able to intercept invading forces, preventing them from establishing a foothold in Roman territory. The navy's presence served as a reminder of Rome's strength and deterred potential adversaries. The secrecy surrounding the navy also extended to the training of sailors. The Roman navy was responsible for safeguarding the vast trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean, ensuring the safe passage of merchant ships carrying essential goods and resources. By patrolling the seas, the navy prevented piracy and other threats to maritime trade, maintaining the flow of goods that sustained Rome's economy. So let us raise a glass to the Roman sailors, the unsung heroes of the ancient world. The navy's efforts contributed to the growth of Roman knowledge about the world around them, further expanding the empire's influence and understanding. Overall, the Roman navy's contributions to the Roman Empire were multifaceted and indispensable. Its role in trade, military operations, exploration and security was vital to the empire's prosperity, stability, and growth. Without the Roman navy's dedication and sacrifices, the fate of the Roman Empire may have been vastly different. Potential recruits underwent rigorous physical and mental tests to assess their suitability for life at sea. Those who passed the screening process were then trained in various aspects of seamanship, navigation, and combat. However, details about these training methods were kept confidential to ensure that rival nations could not infiltrate Roman naval ranks or develop countermeasures against its sailors. For these sailors, the sea becomes their new battlefield, their ships, their new homes. By discouraging gossip and the spread of rumors, the navy aimed to prevent confusion and panic from spreading among its sailors, which could have disastrous consequences in battle or during times of crisis. Overall, the Roman navy's commitment to secrecy was a testament to the importance it placed on its naval dominance. Through strict measures to safeguard sensitive information and maintain control over its sailors, Rome ensured that its navy remained a powerful and decisive force in the Mediterranean. They sail in quiet sacrifice. The sea, their battlefield. There's Marcus, a freed slave who sees the navy as his path to true freedom. His knowledge of languages and cultures acquired during his enslavement helps him navigate the diverse ports of the Mediterranean. Each sailor brings unique skills and experiences to the fleet, forming a diverse and tight-knit community. Even the mighty Roman navy, one of the largest navies in the ancient world, had to tread carefully. The ship is laden with grain, the lifeblood of Rome, where over 1 million people depend on this grain to survive. The journey should be a quick one, but as you approach the Egyptian coast, the winds pick up. To prevent them from divulging sensitive information, prisoners were often put to death, with their lips being sewn shut as a final, gruesome measure. This extreme practice ensured that any knowledge gained by the enemy through interrogation or coercion would remain buried in the depths. The Navy's commitment to secrecy was unwavering, with even the materials used in shipbuilding being carefully monitored. By limiting access to shipbuilding resources, Rome ensured that its competitors could not replicate its advanced ship designs or learn about the techniques that made its fleet so formidable. The once calm sea now churns and swells, turning the journey into a nightmare. Lightning flashes and thunder roars as a storm of biblical proportions descends upon you. These men, some free, others slaves, hailed from across the empire. Many were veterans of the navy or army, drawn to seafaring life for its promise of adventure and opportunity. Slaves, though shackled, could earn their freedom through service, while freedmen sought new challenges after leaving the military. Regardless of their status, each man had a vital role to play in keeping Rome's maritime empire afloat. The ship battles the waves, but will it survive the fury of the Mediterranean? Your journey is not just about navigating the vast sea, it's about ensuring the prosperity of the empire. This often overlooked aspect of Roman life is the focus of today's episode, as we explore the gripping tales of Rome's forgotten guardians. Are they locals, welcoming your arrival, or something else? In ancient Rome, coastal dwellers had little use for sailors unless they were pirates. Pirates, those ruthless marauders of the sea, are known to attack without warning. You watch as the pirates board your ship, their cutlasses glinting in the sunlight. It's a fight to the death. Your fellow sailors, armed with swords and nets, stand ready to defend the ship. Amidst the chaos, you grab a sword and join the fray, determined to protect the vital cargo you are carrying. Will you prevail against the ruthless pirates and safeguard the grain supply of Rome? And pirates, there were many, preying on the riches of the Roman Empire. With their numbers swelling due to the introduction of gold coinage, these outlaws threatened the prosperity of Rome. It fell upon the navy to protect merchant ships like yours, patrolling the Azure waters. Life aboard a Roman ship. As the ship cuts through the waves, you spot a group of men waving from a nearby shore. Suddenly, a lookout cries out "Paratus," sending shivers down your spine. The Mediterranean, a sea of challenges. Picture this. You're sailing on a Roman warship, the pride of the fleet, on a mission to quell a revolt in Alexandria. Days at sea can turn into weeks as you struggle to keep the ship afloat amid the raging storm. From Alexandria to Ostia, life as a sailor in ancient Rome was not just about the destination. It was about the journey, a journey filled with challenges that tested the limits of the men who sailed the seas. The Roman navy boasted over 2,000 ships and 200,000 sailors, yet few know their stories. Meet Titus, a former gladiator who, after years of brutal combat in the Colosseum, seeks a new life at sea. Despite their differences, these men share a common purpose: protecting Rome's interests and maintaining the flow of trade and communication throughout the empire. Under the eagle's shadow, the Roman navy operated under the watchful eye of the Roman Senate, which appointed magistrates to oversee its activities. The importance of secrecy extended to the treatment of captured enemies. For instance, the Romans developed a type of cement known as, which was made from volcanic ash. In addition to protecting sensitive information, the Roman Navy's secrecy measures were also designed to maintain discipline and order within the fleet, ensuring the flourishing of the empire. Protecting trade routes. Ferrying soldiers. The Navy's role extended to the transportation of troops and military equipment, enabling the Roman army to deploy its forces effectively throughout the empire. Conquering rebellions. The Roman Navy played a significant role in suppressing rebellions and securing the empire's borders. Defending against invaders. The Roman Navy stood as the first line of defense against potential invaders and foreign threats. Beyond these primary responsibilities, the Roman Navy also engaged in scientific exploration, surveying and mapping the Mediterranean. Their bravery and sacrifice often went unnoticed, but their contributions were no less important. Soldiers fight for many reasons: money, glory, perhaps even love of their country, but rarely do they wage war. In the name of God. The Roman legions were different. This was a deeply religious army. From high-ranking officers to lowly privates, every man was bound by a shared belief system. They carried altars with them across the provinces, sacrificed animals before battles, and avoided making decisions during certain days of the month. When we think of the Roman Empire today, we picture a brutal fighting force, one that cared little about life and even less about death. It's time to look beyond the Hollywood image of the unfeeling Romans and see how much religion permeated their everyday lives. Before entering a new town, the legate would sacrifice to him, the idea being that if all went well, the locals would welcome the Romans and supply them with everything they needed. If the genius loci was displeased, though, and the legions entered a hostile city, then the troops could expect ambushes, bad information, and a lack of support. Join me as we explore the religion of the legion, part 4 of our series on the Roman army. In Livy's account of Rome's early history, omens play a big role. He reminded his soldiers that they were engaged in a holy war, one that was sanctioned by the gods. They were fighting to defend their homes and families, and uphold Roman ideals. And it was personal, too. The men knew that their opponents were fellow Italians, citizens of Rome. But a soldier who follows orders is not to blame. He's just doing his duty. Not only did the legions worship a multitude of deities, but so did the people of the empire. Ancient Rome was full of temples, shrines, and priests. It was a truly religious civilization. So even if a Roman general was defeated, his troops were still on it, and they would soon be fighting brothers against brothers. The motivation here was clear. If you wanted to be successful, then you had to be careful with the gods. But it was worth it. The higher the stakes, the more serious the Romans became. A general didn't just take an enemy's city because it was strategic or economically valuable. He did so to bring the people within the walls to the one true Roman way of life, including the worship of Roman gods. To the Romans, this was not just a military conquest, but a religious mission. Their job was to spread civilization throughout the known world, and religion was central to that goal. The Romans believed that if they followed the correct procedures, then the unpredictable nature of human affairs could be tamed. If you would like to see your name at the end of the episodes, then please consider supporting us. You can learn more by checking the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't fight, you were abandoning your duty to the gods and the state, and worse, you would be branded a coward. Our job is to maintain order and protect the pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem, but we're not allowed inside. Our Jewish allies have threatened us with a curse. What do? The answer is simple. We turn to divination. Caesar built a temple to the Gallic deities and ordered that sacrifices be made in their honor. He also kept one day each year for festivals. The goal was to win over the locals. It's a smart strategy. Take, for example, the Egyptian campaign under Octavian. The future emperor visited the oracle of Zeus at Adorna and received the cryptic message, "Give back the standards." The Romans misinterpreted the prophecy and invaded Egypt. But before doing so, Octavian built a temple to Zeus and made offerings to Isis, the chief deity of the Egyptians. He thought that if he placated the mother of all gods, then the locals would be appeased. And he was right. Octavian was welcomed in Alexandria, and the temple remained popular for centuries. We consult the entrails of sacrificed animals, study the flight of birds, and watch for other signs. If the gods are on our side, then we are safe. If not, then maybe we should withdraw. A favorable omen encouraged the Romans to go to war. An unfavorable one dissuaded them from doing so. Soldiers also gave thanks to the gods for protecting them. A prayer was said before a meal, just like back home, and the legionary was mindful of the possibility of death. His food might be his last supper. Even though death was always present, it was never spoken of. Romans believed in a peaceful afterlife, one in which the good could enjoy the rewards of the gods. So there was no need to fear dying. In fact, a soldier's death could be glorious. Dying in battle meant that he would be remembered by his comrades and honored by the state. There was also the chance of going to Elysium, a paradise reserved for heroes. Instead, they were employed to gain knowledge about the overall success of a campaign. Was he still honored? Yes, as long as he died bravely. The Romans took pride in their endurance and fortitude. To die on the battlefield, whether in victory or defeat, was honorable. In Book 3 of the Aeneid, we read about the shield of the fallen warrior Aeneas, made by Vulcan. It was the first shield ever to be crafted in Italy. The story goes that when Aeneas dipped his hand into the water to quench his thirst, a violent earthquake shook the ground. As the hero looked around to find the source of the tremor, a fish jumped from the water and landed on his outstretched palm. Recognizing this as an omen from the gods, Athena told Aeneas to build a city where the fish leapt from the sea. The shield was later used by Romulus when he killed his twin brother, Remus. So the Romans revered any warrior who died valiantly. Victory or defeat didn't matter. For example, once, when the dictator was sacrificing to the god Terminus, a raven flew away with the entrails that were supposed to be inspected. The bird's action was interpreted as an omen, and Terminus was so displeased with the Romans that he refused to accept their offering. And because of this, Rome lost the battle. Of course, there are the major state religions, those of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, Juno, Minerva, Mars, and so forth. Unusual birds, strange dreams, and unsettling auguries could all provide insight into what the future held. For instance, one night, Publius Cornelius Scipio was having a terrible dream. He saw Rome in flames, its inhabitants being slaughtered, and walls crumbling. The next day, he made a sacrifice to the gods, and received a response that comforted him. Terminus warned that danger was ahead, but also promised safety. And sure enough, when Scipio followed Terminus' instructions and built fortifications around the city of New Carthage, for example, there was a cult of the genius of the eagle, a spirit that inhabited the military standard. If the eagle was taken in battle, then the genius was captured as well. Once the decision to go to war was made, the soldiers prepared themselves both physically and spiritually. We know that the eve of battle was marked by great solemnity. Officers and enlisted men alike fasted. Some sacrificed small animals at twilight. Others poured out a libation of wine to Mars, the god of war. These rituals calmed the soldiers' nerves and reminded them of what they were fighting for. Victories were attributed to a good genius. Defeat, however, meant that he was angry and needed to be appeased. So after losing a battle, the eagle would be returned to the camp, the genius propitiated with sacrifices. However, these were official cults, ones that the emperor headed. Private soldiers didn't really have much to do with them. Instead, they followed household gods like the Lyri, spirits associated with the home, or the Penates, deities who protected stores and food supplies. Every centurion had a little shrine in his tent for these too. The Lories and Penates were given offerings before meals, which may sound odd to us, but remember, most legionaries were poor men who fought for their daily bread. So ensuring that their rations lasted was very important. We've talked about the eagles, the discipline, and the logistics of the Roman military. Now it's time to discuss something a bit different. When the legions marched into a new province, the soldiers would set up camp, and with it an altar to the local gods. Wherever they went, the Romans adapted their beliefs to fit the territory. So in Judea, for example, they worshipped the Jewish god, Yahweh, while in Egypt, they venerated the goddess Isis. The legion was not only tolerant of other religions, but also had its own deities. Other gods were more specific to the army. The soldiers also prayed to the genius loci, the protective spirit of the place. This brings us to omens, or the attempt to divine the will of the gods. Omens weren't just limited to sacrifices. So you can see that omens and sacrifices were not used to predict the outcome of a single event, like say, a battle. Speaking of battles, let's talk about what happened on the eve of a major engagement. In Polybius's account of Rome's civil war, we learn that Gaius Marius gathered his troops before a battle with Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Once the fight began, though, the soldiers didn't really pray anymore. They left that to the officers. And it wasn't just about asking for help. But what if a soldier was killed in a defeat? There's also another point to consider. A general could take actions that led to defeat. As we close this episode, I want to emphasize how widespread religion was in Roman society. Let's imagine that we are stationed in Judea. The Temple of Solomon is nearby. Religion was a tool for creating order and chaos. There were rituals for almost every occasion. It seems that Julius Caesar had a similar opinion. He believed that the way to rule the unruly Gauls was through religion. As you can tell, Rome was a complex web of religion. I hope you enjoyed this episode with a special thanks to our supporter. Rome has been good to me. I am owed much by her, and she will pay up now at last. For 40 years, I have bled for her, fought for her, died a little bit for her each day, always hoping one day soon it would be enough. Now it is. Now they are giving us land. They are giving us citizenship. They are giving us peace. And yet, there are tears in my eyes. Oh, how we laugh about that among ourselves. A piece of paper that says we are Romans. We who have seen the empire up close. So many that it doesn't seem to matter anymore. Every time I touch the soil, I feel strength flowing into me. The earth is under my fingernails. It's caked on my skin. I smell its dust in my hair. When I look up at the sky, I know its seasons intimately. I feel its rains on my face. I know the parched earth's song of thirst. I have worked with the soil more years than I can count. In the army, you learn what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself. In the army, you forge bonds of brotherhood that can last lifetimes. You don't just fight alongside these men. You train alongside them, eat alongside them, sleep alongside them. You carry their shield alongside them and stand in the ranks alongside them. Some of us can put down roots and grow old and die and be buried under the soil we love. Some of us can't get the blood out of our eyes, and the nightmares. The nightmares never end. But for some, the quiet rhythm of soil, the warmth of family, the crackle of hearth fires, has replaced the clash of swords. For some, the legion is still marching. For some, the eagle still flies. For some, the dream has lasted a lifetime. Some of us can finally be free, but some of us look out over our land and see only ghosts. The familiar hills and valleys are haunted by the specters of those we've lost, of those we've left behind. You're as close to these men as anyone could ever be. And when you leave the army, you leave that behind. There is no music more beautiful than the wind whispering through grain or the dry leaves crunching underfoot in autumn. There's nothing like it. I miss my brothers. I miss the lictors cutting the sacrificial bull. I miss the eagle rising above the ramparts. I miss the eagle on my breastplate. I miss marching in the ranks, knowing that I'm part of something greater than myself. I miss everything about being a soldier, except the dying. I don't miss the dying. Each loss blurs into the next, until it's hard to remember why you're still alive. But you can't give up anything if you're a soldier. You're a cog in the machine. You're expendable. If you get tired, someone else will fill your slot. If you complain, you'll be punished. If you suggest that maybe you're not invincible, that maybe you're not gods, they'll throw you in a cell and see if a few lashes will remind you who is in charge. You can't think about retiring as a soldier. You can't even hope for it. It's treason to want to desert Rome. I know its streets are choked with traffic. Its markets filled with shoddy goods. Its people grasping and scheming, and we're allowed to dream about owning our own farmstead, even if you know deep down it'll never happen. Still, you dream, don't you? I know it reeks of stale urine and garbage and ambition. In the country, the air is washed clean by the winds that blow over fields and forests. I breathe deeply, and I feel alive. It's also about getting away from the army. For some of us, the army is the only home we've ever known. Most of us joined up as teenagers, younger even, and we learned everything from the army. How to read and write, how to fight, how to survive. We learned discipline, loyalty, courage, and we learned what it meant to be Roman. Yes, we heard the lectures about Rome being a civilization and a republic in the center of the world. But we learned what Rome really was from our centurions and our tribunes, from our comrades and our enemies. We learned that Rome was family. We learned that Rome was survival. We learned that Rome was survival. The wars in Dacia, in Germania, in Parthia, against the pirates, the brigands, the rebels, the list goes on and on. I can fix the old stone walls. I can plant vines on the hillsides. I can drive the goats down to the meadows in the morning and watch my sheepdog herd them expertly. I can build a house sturdy enough to withstand any storm, and maybe one day my grandson will inherit it and he'll look out over the land and feel the same pride I felt when I first saw it. We hear stories of legionaries who have been fighting since they were boys and are now old men, gray beards dragging themselves through the mud. But sometimes I think maybe I would have preferred to stay in the army. I know what you're thinking. Surely you don't mean that. You're getting out while the getting is good. You're gonna make something of yourself. You're gonna become a farmer or a merchant or start your own business. Don't be stupid. Why would you choose a life of drudgery? I'm not proud of that. I don't want to be a soldier until I'm too old to walk. I want to get out while I'm still young enough to enjoy the fruits of my labor, to see my grandkids grow up. We who know how much emperors and senators and patricians and even some of the plebe despise us. What does a piece of paper mean if you cash it in for something real like land? And yet it means everything because now my kids don't have to look over their shoulder. They won't have to beg for scraps of respect from the patrician who owns most of the town we live in. They can hold their heads high and say they are Roman citizens, which means they are equal before the law. My reward is to go back to the place where I grew up, to the place where my father still lives, the only home I've ever known. And here, the land is rough and wild, but it's mine. No one can take it from me. I can plant a flag on it and call myself its master. That is something even Rome cannot do. I know what you're thinking. Surely, it's not so bad. You get to retire to a villa on an estate in the middle of Italy with all the luxuries that come with it. Well, you'd be wrong. I am one of the lucky ones. I get to go home. This is the dream of every Roman veteran. It's what we think about when we're training recruits, when we're building roads in the wilderness, when we're fending off barbarian attacks. We dream of getting out of this army, of being our own boss, of not having someone else tell us where to go, when to wake up, what to eat. We want our own land because then we can really be free. And now we are going to get it. We get citizenship, too. The other thing that's waiting for us is peace. So many of my friends, comrades, brothers, have fallen, and those fruits are sweet. I already taste them on my tongue. What do I know about the city? So yes, I am glad to be going home. This farm has been in my family for generations. They gave us land, citizenship, and peace. Those are the three things we wanted. Because it's not just about getting away from Rome. In the army, every day could be your last. So you learn to make the most of every minute. Now we're just numbers again. Gaius, Publius, Lucius, Sextus, we're no longer legio. The second, if I could give up everything else and never have to see another dead soldier again, I would. But we are allowed to get old. We are allowed to get injured. We have the land now. We have the piece of paper. We have the peace. And some of us are happy. Some of us still hear the clash of arms, the screams of the dying, the rumble of chariots, the shouts of the mob. For some, the empire has ended. She's given us our rewards. She's cashed her debt. Let her have her peace. She earned it. The echoes of Rome have faded. The legions have marched away. The villas crumble beneath vines and time. Yet history lingers in quiet footfalls, whispered myths, and the gentle hush of forgotten stories. As your eyes grow heavy, let the weight of the soldiers pack, the softness of velvet couches, the hum of distant construction, and the whisper of northern winds settle around you. It waits for the questions and the seeking, the searching and the finding. It waits for the dreams to be dreamt and the stories to be shared. History, like sleep, is patient. It waits for the telling, the retelling, and the reimagining. Let the whispers of bygone eras rock you gently, like a cradle, a lullaby. Rest now. Your journey through time is ended for tonight. Listen closely. Can you hear it? Until then, good night. Let the moon, like a Roman goddess, bathe you in her silvery light. Close your eyes and dream of bygone days. For in this moment of quietude, you are part of the story. The strumming of a distant lute, the rhythmic clapping of dancers, the boisterous laughter of emperors, the murmur of philosophers, the clatter of chariot wheels on cobblestone streets, the murmur of lovers whispering sweet nothings under the moonlight, the echo of gladiators' swords in the Colosseum's hushed stands, the gentle lapping of water against the walls of the Pantheon, the distant roar of lions in the night. Let the past, like a soft blanket, wrap around you and hold you as you drift to sleep. Their words may have faded, but their spirits linger, dancing and swirling in the twilight of day and the silver glow of moonlight. The night is filled with the music of memory, and over all of this, the soft, lilting sound of ancient voices speaking in tongues, both known and forgotten. In this timeless expanse, where past and present intertwine, you are held in the embrace of history. You are cradled by the very echoes of Rome. Let the stars, like distant emperors, watch over you. Sleep well, and when you wake, the whispers of history will still be here, waiting to be discovered, waiting to lead you on new adventures through time.